Hi, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. It's Kelsey again. You know me as author, publisher, person doing a lot of things. And I'm very happy to have on with us today author Gerard LaSalle, who has written many books, two of which, Widow Walk and Isthmus. I'm very pleased to work with my own publishing company, Avasta. And Gar is joining us today to talk about the process for Widow Walk, how he designed this cover, how he got wonderful people to work with him, all of the stages it went through, and eventually it is an award-winning cover, but you'll see it took a lot to get there. This is recorded, so if any of you are tuning in late, you can watch the recording later. For those of you watching live, we've already turned on the question answer. So if you feel like you have a question, just go ahead and type it in, and I'll interrupt Gar, and we'll get your questions answered, or you can hang around afterwards. Also, I should let you all know that if you want to start reading Widow Walk for free, if you go to gerardlasalle.com/writers, and I put the link below our video, you can download the first few chapters of the book and start reading it for free right now, if you want. So I'm going to turn it on over to Gar, and just so you know, Gar is a really interesting author. He comes to actually publishing after a very distinguished career in the medical field, particularly emergency medicine. But not only that, he's done films, he does screenwriting, he does sculpture. He's a very interesting left-brain person, and you'll really see that as he describes his process and what he brought from all of that experience into the creation of the Widow Walk design. So Gar, I'm turning on over to you. Take the stage.
Thanks, Kelsey. Can you hear me all right?
Yes, I can hear you well.
Okay, good. And can you see the picture?
Yes.
All right. Well, hello, everybody. And first of all, thank you very much, Kelsey, for inviting me to present to your group. I know how popular your processes are, and my experience in working with Kelsey and her team has been absolutely wonderful as a great next step in the writing process and the publishing process. Just a little bit about the book, and this, what we'll talk about today, I think, is an abbreviated version of something that I usually present when I am invited to libraries or book clubs or bookstores to present. So I'm not going to talk a lot about Widow Walk or Isthmus other than what it took to create their covers. But very briefly, Widow Walk was written 3 years ago. Actually, the story for it was structured many, many years ago as a foundation for a pitch for a screenplay. And producers that I was working with at the time suggested that what they said is a great story, but they thought it'd be better rather than writing yet another spec script to create a property in the form of a novel. So I set it aside, and several years later had the opportunity, as I was starting to wind down my professional career as a physician, to actually write in earnest and structure the story in a novel format. The story is based on true events that occurred on Whidbey Island in 1857, 1858, 1859, when there were very few non-native settlers in the Pacific Northwest, and they were still contending with what were known as the Northerners, who were predatory Northwest tribes that came from a variety of clans and were headhunters and slavers. I won't tell you the story of Widow Walk. Other than that, it is a compelling story, I believe, and I've been told that by many people. And the second book, Isthmus, is the first sequel to the book. Ultimately, there will be a total of 5 books in this saga. that follow some of the main characters through their lives and into the 20th century. After I wrote Widow Walk, I was approached by a number of people, one of whom was someone I worked with, another emergency physician who was an artist and a graphic artist, and I had worked with him in the past to create posters for some of our patient safety initiatives. And his work was very creative, a lot of fun, and he loved the first draft of a book, and he said, "Do you mind if I do some drawings?" And I said I'd be honored. And what I didn't want was to have the book sit on a shelf, because it either scared people away, like the one to the left on your screen here. This is a book that has been written by a friend of mine, and that's his own art. And the title in the art is daunting, as daunting as the writing. It's a beautiful, beautiful series of short stories, but it took me a long time to decide to actually pick up the book because of what the cover was telling me. So I didn't want something like that. Nor did I, being a new author, you don't have any brand recognition or name recognition. Albert Camus could print his name in micro type, and yet people would pick up his book, and so you could get away with a very plain cover from that standpoint. I wanted people to be able to come to the book, be compelled to pick it up, read it, and actually tell something about what was going on in the story. So we started in the process of doing that, and I'm going to just very rapidly go through a series of slides, and ultimately I ended up working with 3 different graphic artists and a team of people to make this work. Originally we were talking about this being written in the genre of a dime store novel, and this was a rendition of the type of genre, since a lot of people said, "This is Larry McMurtry, isn't it? This is the same sort of story that would be from that sort of thing." And it's written in the mindset of people who lived during that time. So we considered doing a cover and actually creating something that would have graphics all the way through the novel, similar to things that I had seen when I was younger. So the graphic art I was telling you about started doing a series of drawings that depicted things, and they were rather cartoonish in some ways, but they did tell the story. He tried other things as well. This is something that actually could be from the scene, one of the scenes where the shaman of one of the northerner tribes essentially is dealing with the raiders that are coming in from a raid, etc. And I tried this out to people who had actually read the book, and it was too frightening, particularly since the book was about a woman's journey and a number of other things that would probably frighten people away. So we moved on from that. This is a photograph that we did. The woman in the photograph is carrying a bundle of white roses and something known as a pepper box pistol. And we posted. Are we getting some feedback there, Kelsey?
I don't hear any feedback. I think you sound great. Okay. Although I think you should add the side note of who that is in the photo.
Oh, that's my fiance, Barbara, and we took a photograph of Barbara. We dressed her in something that would resemble clothing of the time, and we photoshopped her into the actual site of where the story occurred in Evie's Plateau on Whidbey Island, where the massacre actually occurred. And the symbols in the story that are in her hand. Put that in front of other people, and although it is an evocative picture in some ways, several people said no. That doesn't do it justice. So, oops. Um, these pictures actually are sculpture that I do. This is a piece I'm currently working on that'll be done in bronze ultimately and patinaed into something beyond what I have in the clay pieces here. These are 14 by 4 feet and 6 by 4 feet. And this is a piece that I did that's out on Vashon Island on Maury, where I have my studio. And I decided to play a little bit with some of the sculptural aspects of this and try to incorporate that in some way, because I've been influenced pretty heavily by Pacific Northwest native art. And in particular, the argillite carvings that are
Actually, I am getting feedback on your side. Just check to see if your headphones are plugged all the way in. Otherwise, we'll hear you twice on your side.
I got so much buzz I didn't hear you there. I'm sorry.
We are getting a little bit of an echo on your side.
Okay.
Can you unplug and plug back in your headphones just to make sure that we're not getting double?
Yeah, that'd be fine. All right. Can you hear me now?
I still hear you perfectly. I'm just hearing from others that there's feedback. So if somebody listening wouldn't mind typing in the Q&A, or if Archana is on, letting me know if it's fixed or not. Gar, could you say something just so we could hear it?
Okay. This is an argillite, piece of argillite. Now it went away, so can you hear me?
I can.
All right. I'm not getting any feedback now.
Okay, great. Woohoo! Sorry about that, everyone.
Okay, folks. Sorry. This is a piece of argillite. Argillite is a soft shale that, when it's soaked in water, will absorb enough on its surface, or adsorb enough that it can be carved. And the Haida people, who were probably, some of whom were probably the Northerners, although multiple different tribes fit into that term. They carved their argillite, and their work started being collected in the 17th century all over the world. And many people made a living with that. This is an example of their beautiful art. I encourage you to go up to the museum in Victoria, to the regional museum there, where there is a huge exhibit of their argillite carvings. And there's also in Vancouver a museum that is dedicated to Bill Reed, who is a Haida carver as well. And you'll see the style, and I've been influenced by that in my own work. So with that, after failing to move anybody with the different versions of the cover, I started working with someone by the name of Randy Mott, who was recommended to me by the editor I was working with. And we spoke quite a bit, and I asked him to consider something like this, taking, this is a argillite carving. It's about 3 feet high or so. And I said, start doing some research on the Haida work, if you would, and let's see if we can incorporate that into the story, and we'll play with that conceptually. He came up with this as the first iteration, and what he did here was he took a medallion that actually is a Haida medallion, and it tells a story. I don't know if you can see the cursor, but it tells a story using the totems that are part of the religion and lore of the tribal peoples, and incorporated that into that. I tried that out with several people, and that resonated quite a bit, but we decided it would make a great deal of sense to essentially have it focus rather than using something and appropriating it into our story, tell our story and create a medallion instead that would be something that would depict the totem, so to speak, of the characters in our story. So after reading the book 3 times, Randy came up with these conceptually as the totems of the main characters in the book. In the case of, without telling you too much, the main central character, Emmy, is both a hawk and a dove. And she has a son who is known as the Little Wolverine, and a husband who could be described by some as a beaver. And she has a near amorous adventure in some ways with someone by the name of George Pickett, who is definitely an eagle. He lived up in the Pacific Northwest and later achieved fame in the Civil War during several battles, and in particular at Gettysburg. And then, of course, the raven, which is very important in multiple tribes, but also in this story as well. So we played with that, but I talked to him and I said, look, they need to interact, because this is a story. It's not just a depiction of the totems themselves. They are interacting, and this was the first iteration he did, and I didn't care for that because it diminished it really didn't tell the story about the main protagonist, which is Emmy, the hawk dove. And this was once again another iteration, and then finally he came up with this, and this is an airbrush version of that, in which you see in a boat, in a long boat, the raven and the wolverine, the beaver, the eagle, and the combined hawk dove of the Emmy character. I like this, and I said, let's use this as the medallion, and let's incorporate maps into this cover, and also some other symbolism. And this was the first version of the cover for the first edition of Widow Walk. Several people, actually lots of people, like this very, very much. And we had to put the maps in there because not a lot of people know very much about Pacific Northwest history, let alone the geography. So we incorporated maps into the story that speak to where the events occurred in Vancouver Island and the Queen Charlotte Islands, now known as Haida-Gwaii, and the rivers in here where Emmy would have moved to try to retrieve her kidnapped child, and the Whidbey Island, place where the actual main event occurred involving her husband and herself. We put the roses in there as well because so many people commented on that. And that book sold pretty well, and then Greenleaf Publishing decided that they wanted to take the book, but they thought that this was too dark of a cover, and there were several other themes in the story, so they asked if we could change the cover. And so we did a second edition, and I started working with their artist, a fellow by the name of Neil Gonzalez. And we actually created a work group of 40 people, 20 of whom had read the book and 20 of whom had not. Some of these were associates, and some of these were friends, and some of these were strangers. And we created, Neil Gonzalez created 4 separate covers, and we tested these with multiple people. I insisted we keep the medallion in there, so this is one of the covers. This is another cover. And this is another cover. Once again, incorporating the map in the background, faintly in the background. In this case, we have the woman in the foreground and a man on the horse, which picks up one of the chapters involving 2 of the main characters. But this is the one that most of the people actually voted for in both groups. And very simply because it tells a story of a journey. So you see the canoes in the foreground. On a beautiful day in the Pacific Northwest, this is very much what it looks like. This is what it would have looked like moving up one of the rivers. And I think that it's lighter and than the others, and in some ways speaks to the hope that I think should be in the story as well. So that's how we moved to that particular cover. It ultimately won the USA Best Book Award for covers, and it was a fun journey to do that. The second book, Isthmus, took place in a different place altogether. It takes place in Panama. And if people don't know much about Pacific Northwest, at least in the United States, fewer even know very much about Panama other than the Panama Canal. And when you delve into the history of that area, it is rich. It is an amazing place. And without giving away too much of the story really takes some of the same characters, and rather than going around the Horn of South America, which is expensive, arduous, dangerous process, these people decide to cross the Isthmus of Panama on the brand new, almost brand new Panama Railroad, a 47-mile railroad that cost $25 in gold one way per passenger and $3 in gold per pound of luggage. And it was very, very expensive and still very dangerous. But you could get across the Isthmus of Panama theoretically in 6 hours instead of 60 days. And so that's where the next story goes, and we had to tell a story there as well. We decided that it needed to incorporate.
Hey, actually, Gar, do you mind if we pause just a sec? I want to show folks the hardcover version of Widow Walk, because they all saw. Hi, everybody. You all saw the kind of the ebook version, but I want to show you the hardcover version, because one thing that was really interesting to me when I saw this book, and one of the reasons that I loved it, is they went ahead and kept the design throughout. Like you'll see the maps in here, you'll see the medallion at each chapter, but what's really gorgeous about this book, and it's too bad this is video, I wish we had tactile screen, is that the wrap on the hardcover is embossed, so that when you pick it up, you can actually feel this, and the sculptural, you can kind of see if I can get it in the lights, the sculptural elements are very obvious. So it was interesting to see, it kind of translates, it shows one way in digital, but honestly, in person, this book is even more gripping. I think it's much stronger in person, which is quite the challenge when authors and readers generally connect on Amazon. But I just wanted to show you guys all the actual final result, because it's one of the most beautiful books that I've got in my own collection. All right, Gar, if you want to keep going on Isthmus.
Okay, let me see if I can find
it should be behind everyone's. Oh, there you go.
All right. Well, there's several elements in the story. These are in my research down in Panama when I was traveling. I became acquainted with people in Nombre de Dios and in Portobello, and the story of the Cimarrones, who were the escaped slaves who aided the French and the English pirates to fight against the Spanish. That's in the story. How do we incorporate some of that in the cover? This is one of the devils that they fight in the story. There are graphics that were done when the railroad was in operation from about 1855 till the Panama Canal really virtually replaced most of the use of the railroad. But this is what the trains looked like. Train travel was relatively new, it was less than 30 years old in general, and the engines came from all over the world, Belgium and France mostly, and the gauges of the railroad were different, and thousands and thousands of people lost their lives trying to help build the canal, and that all got built into the story as well. One of the interesting things about, to me, about the history of Panama is the whole story of the Camino Real and how the Spanish moved literally trillions of dollars, probably in today's dollars, of gold and silver across the isthmus by plundering the native art that was Aztecs, the Incas, and the Panamanian people themselves. There's very little Panamanian art that's still left, but this is an example of Panamanian art with certain types of figures that are found in the story, the jaguar, the lizards, and the pieces that we do have in the museums in New York and in Panama are generally gold or copper that is done in something known as repoussé, which is an embossed, as opposed to something that is carved out. It is the metal is heated, and then the design is pushed from behind. And those of you who know what I have seen repoussé understand that it's two-dimensional, three-dimensional, and it's beautiful stuff. And this is an example of some Aztec art. And once again, there are certain figures and characters in the art that you'll find all the way through in terms of the symbolism and the characters. So I work with Randy Mott again, and Kelsey and I agreed that, because I was working with Kelsey at this point, we agreed that we would work with Greenleaf's cover artist, but we would go back to Randy Mott to work on a new medallion, because we couldn't obviously carry Pacific Northwest art into the Isthmus of Panama. So I asked Randy to develop something after reading the book several times, and we agreed that the antagonist, the main antagonist, an anti-hero named Bocamalo, is a primary figure, and a jaguar by his own depiction, but he fights with certain demons, and in this case it's a three-headed serpent, and we incorporated into that and something that represented a repoussé piece, the surgeon with a scalpel here, and a warrior, and the mother figure who would be our antagonist, or our protagonist, once again, Emmy from the first book, and their interaction. That became the medallion for Isthmus. And then we went to Neil, and Neil came up with 4 covers incorporating the medallion, and we tried different pictures using his thoughts in terms of a journey on a train. This one was one, and unfortunately this doesn't look like Panama at all. Panama does not have rolling hills and flat areas. It is incredible growth and jungle, and they go through the Darien jungle, of course, and the greenery grows as much as 6 feet in a day in some places. It's just pretty amazing. This was another version that he created. Once again, we went to a test audience and went to 40 people and tried this one out. And then this was another one. And this one had, the train was more like it. However, the colors are not appropriate for Panama. It is hardly blue. And this is the one that we eventually settled on. Kelsey and I looked at it carefully. We put all 4 of the covers out to these different people, and this is the one that everybody ended with. And that's what the final cover looks like for Isthmus. And this is a good depiction of what the Panama rivers look like, in particular the Chagres River, which is also known as Rio Lagartos, where they have all of the lizards and the giant crocodiles and a variety of other reptiles. It's a very interesting place. And I think that the foliage is much more typical of what you'd see there. I think this is a compelling cover. In this case, we didn't have any blurbs that came from actual reviews, since this is pre-publishing. So we simply added our own blurb to it to try to draw people in to the story. And that's where we're at right now there. And I'll open it up for questions right now, if anybody has any questions.
Gar, do you mind turning off your screen sharing so we can see you?
Okay. Can you see me?
No, now we see me.
So how do I do that?
You should be able to, when you hover over my face, there should be, it says, see you are screen sharing, hit stop in that green bar on the top of my head.
Okay.
Aha, there you are.
Okay. Is that all right?
Yeah, that looks good. So I do have some questions that I pulled from Twitter for you. One is, this was obviously a very big undertaking with much time and much resources put into it. And many authors would go with something that looks good or that they thought that the market might like and call it a day. So why was it important for you? The question is, why was it important for you to invest so much time and resources into developing the cover?
I didn't look at it really as anything but part of the joy of the whole process, because it is storytelling. And first of all, the book doesn't, if people aren't compelled to go and pick it up and look at it in the first place, then it doesn't, you can't get the story out. It's another opportunity to tell a story in some ways and actually tease the potential audience and the readers into the story in some way, and perhaps even pick up on some symbols that they might not have otherwise thought of. So for me, it was part of the joy of writing, and I didn't look at it as an arduous process at all. It's just something that had to be done, and it wouldn't have been served well by a very plain cover or something that was too abstract. So I'm not sure if that's helpful, a helpful answer, but that's kind of how I arrived at that. So
another question that came through Twitter was, how does this compare to authors? How do you think it compares to authors' experience working with a big publisher? You have kind of a unique situation. I call you a hybrid author. You're both an indie author and working with kind of new age publishers, new age meaning modern. So you have a lot more involvement and control. How do you think that this experience might have been different if you were working for one of the big six or publishing through one of the big six?
What I have been told is that you lose control of the cover. You don't have the same opportunities to invest the time. They're on timelines. They have contracts with their artists, and unless you have a lot of clout, you're not given the same opportunity. So for me, this was very satisfying, because I had a sense of, okay, how do we tell the story and pull it out? What was good in working with Greenleaf, and what was good about working with your group, was that there was a good give and take all the way through the process.
And here's a question from Tim, who says, Gar, can you share a little about the next book, and do you have an idea for the cover? And tell him the name, because I love the name.
Okay, well, the next book is called The Fairness of Beasts, which takes place in between the years of 1861 and 1863, right during the smack dab in the middle of the Civil War. It involves some of the characters who were in Book 2 and in Book 1. Most of it takes place on the East Coast, in Virginia and in New Orleans and in Boston. And the story is, I'm only about 2 or 3 chapters into the book at this point. I know where it's going. I know the final scenes of the book, But if I'm going to try to carry a medallion in, I'm actually a little terrified because there's been so many books written about the Civil War. I think this is going to be more both inside and out on the periphery of the Civil War and all the events that occur. And it's going to be very important to set up Book 4 and Book 5 in this as well as we're doing. So that's a long way of saying, Tim, I don't have a clue about how the cover is going to work at this point in time. Nor do I have a sense at this point about what kind of medallion we're dealing with. What I don't want is a bunch of Confederate and American flags all over the place.
Okay, I think that that's it for the questions we've got right now, but I'm going to steal the screen for just a moment so I can show you all where you can start reading Gar's Widow Walk for free. I just posted a link under the video on the Google Plus event page that you can all click on, but if you just go to gerardlasalle.com/writers, you will see it. And you will go on over to where you can win a writing retreat, and everyone who reads Widow Walk in honor of Women's History Month and forwards in the Amazon proof of purchase, and you'll get instructions on how to do that, is entered in a drawing to win a writing retreat, some wine and chocolate, some Pacific Northwest art, Amazon gift cards, all really great, wonderful things. And even if you're not interested in the prizes, which is insane, you can just come over here, click the little button, and we'll send you the first few chapters so you can start reading the book right away. So thanks again to Gar for joining us, and if anyone else has any more questions for him, you can go to his website, gerardlasalle.com, or find him on Twitter, simply Gar LaSalle. Thanks all. Thanks, Gar, for joining us.
My pleasure. Thank you.